The vast marble halls of the Kingston estate gleamed under the warm glow of imported chandeliers. It was the kind of mansion that whispered wealth at every corner: Italian sculptures, French tapestries, and Persian carpets imported at costs that could have fed entire villages. At the heart of this grand fortress lived Richard Kingston, a self-made billionaire, known for his ruthless business sense and, unfortunately, his rigid prejudices. Richard's young son, Daniel, was the only light in the otherwise cold house. Barely 7 years old, Daniel carried the innocence of a child who hadn't yet learned the cruelty of the world. His mother had passed away when he was just a toddler, leaving behind only memories blurred by time. Richard, too consumed by his empire, rarely spared his son more than a passing glance. So it was left to others to raise the boy, and chief among them was the maid, Maria. Maria was a woman in her mid-30s, with deep brown skin, gentle eyes, and a heart full of kindness. She had come from a small village in the Caribbean, leaving behind her own children to find work and send money back home. In Daniel, she saw not just an employer's child but the son she couldn't hold every night. She sang him lullabies, braided his hair when he insisted on copying her style, and taught him little songs in her native tongue. To Daniel, she was not the maid, she was his comfort, his family. One rainy afternoon, Richard returned earlier than expected from a business trip. His polished shoes clicked against the marble floor as he entered the sitting room, only to freeze at the sight before him. There, on the carpet, Daniel sat cross-legged, giggling as Maria cradled him close, pressing her cheek against his. She was teaching him a clapping game, her dark hands gently guiding his small pale ones. Both were laughing so hard they hadn't noticed Richard's arrival. Daniel. Richard's voice sliced through the air like a whip. Both Maria and the boy startled. Daniel, wide-eyed, instinctively held tighter to Maria's arm, not understanding the storm that was about to break. Richard's face flushed crimson, his jaw tight with fury. "What in God's name do you think you're doing?" he thundered, stepping closer. His eyes bore into Maria with disgust. "You will make my son black with your filth. Do not touch him like that again." The words hung heavy in the air. Daniel's laughter died instantly. His little face twisted in confusion. How could a father say something so cruel about the woman who had practically raised him? Maria's lips parted, but for a moment, no words came. Her chest tightened, her heart aching not for herself but for the boy who clung to her, now trembling in silence. "Sir," she began softly, her voice trembling but steadying with each word. "Your son is only playing. Don't you dare lecture me." Richard snapped, pointing a finger at her as though she were dirt on his pristine floor. "You're here to clean, to serve, not to contaminate my boy with your presence." Maria's throat constricted. For years she had endured whispers, side glances, and snide remarks from guests of the household. But never had Richard thrown such venom directly at her in front of Daniel. It wasn't the insult to her race that broke her. It was the way Daniel's small hands shook, the way his eyes brimmed with tears, as if his whole world had been shattered in an instant. Unable to bear it, Maria pulled away gently, forcing a smile at the boy though her own eyes stung. "It's all right, Daniel," she whispered. "Don't cry, sweetheart." Her voice cracked on the last word, betraying her pain. "Go to your room, Daniel," Richard ordered coldly. The boy hesitated, torn between obedience and loyalty to the woman who had kissed away his nightmares and bandaged his scraped knees. He looked up at his father, then back at Maria, before finally running upstairs, his sobs echoing down the hall. Richard turned on Maria once more. "Pack your things. I want you out of this house by morning. I won't have you poisoning my son's mind, or his skin." That night, Maria sat on the edge of her small bed in the servants' quarters, staring at the suitcase she had not yet packed. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. For the first time in years, she felt powerless. Not because she would lose her job, but because she would lose Daniel. The boy who needed her, the boy who loved her as his own. And upstairs, in his cavernous room, Daniel wept into his pillow. For the first time in his young life, he began to question if love could be wrong, and why the world seemed so cruel to the person he loved most. The night after the storm of words passed in restless silence. Rain tapped against the tall windows of the Kingston mansion, as though the sky itself mourned what had happened. Maria hadn't slept. She sat on her bed, hands trembling, staring at the half-packed suitcase on the floor. Each folded garment seemed to weigh 100 pounds, each shirt and scarf a reminder of Daniel's laughter and little hands tugging at her sleeve. Leaving meant abandoning him to a father who could barely look at him with warmth. But staying could mean further humiliation, or worse, being dragged out with no dignity left. At dawn, she rose, wiped her swollen eyes, and made her way to the kitchen. She moved automatically, preparing Daniel's breakfast as she always did, his favorite, oatmeal with a drizzle of honey and slices of apple. Her heart twisted knowing it might be the last time. Upstairs, Daniel hadn't slept either. His small chest ached from crying, his mind racing with questions far too heavy for a boy of 7. Why had his father been so cruel? Why had he said those awful words about Maria? Daniel didn't fully understand what "make my son black" meant, but he knew the hatred in his father's voice. And he hated that sound. When Maria entered his room with the tray, Daniel flung himself into her arms. "Don't go," he whispered fiercely, his tears soaking into her uniform. "Please, Maria, don't leave me." Maria stroked his hair, fighting her own sobs. "I don't want to leave, darling. But your father, I don't care what he says." Daniel burst out, his face red with defiance. "He doesn't know anything. You're my family, Maria. You take care of me. You love me. I don't want you to go." Maria's heart broke at his words. She cupped his cheeks, her thumbs brushing away his tears. "Shish, my sweet boy. I love you more than you'll ever know. But sometimes love means letting go." "No." Daniel shook his head furiously. "If you go, I'll run away. I'll find you. I'll never forgive him if he makes you leave." The child's desperate declaration frightened Maria more than anything Richard had said. She knew how stubborn Daniel could be, how determined he was once he set his mind. And she knew his father's temper. If Daniel openly defied him, the boy would suffer. Just then, Richard entered the room. His sharp suit, polished shoes, and ice-cold stare filled the doorway. He looked at Maria with the same contempt as the night before. "Why are you still here?" he demanded. Daniel stepped in front of Maria, arms spread as if shielding her. His little chin jutted out in defiance. "She's not leaving." Richard froze for a moment, stunned by the boy's boldness. Then his lips curled. "Daniel, you don't speak to me like that. Move aside." "No," Daniel said firmly. His voice trembled but didn't falter. "Maria's my family. She's the only one who cares about me. You're always too busy, or too angry. If she goes, I go too." Richard's eyes widened. For the first time in years, his son wasn't the silent, obedient child he expected. He was a small, furious protector. Maria quickly stepped forward, placing a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Daniel, please," she whispered, "don't do this. It's not safe." But Daniel wouldn't back down. He turned to his father, his little fists clenched. "You can't tell me who to love. Maria is good. She's kind. You're wrong about her." The room fell into a tense silence. Richard's face twitched with anger, but beneath it there was something else, a flicker of doubt. He had always believed his authority unquestionable, his views absolute. Yet here was his son, standing against him, defending a woman Richard thought beneath their status. "Enough," Richard snapped at last, though his voice wasn't as steady as before. "Maria, get out, now, before you ruin him any further." Maria felt the sting of those words, but she also felt Daniel's small hand grip hers tighter. She looked at Richard, her own voice finally rising with strength she didn't know she had. "Mr. Kingston, I have cared for your son as if he were my own flesh and blood. Not because of money, not because of duty, but because he deserves love. If you cannot see that, then you are the one ruining him." Richard's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. For a fleeting second, shame flickered in his eyes. He turned sharply on his heel and left the room, slamming the door behind him. Maria sank into the chair, trembling. Daniel climbed into her lap, his arms wrapped tightly around her neck. "I won't let him take you away," he whispered fiercely. Maria kissed the top of his head, her heart torn between love and fear. She knew this wasn't over. Richard Kingston was not a man to back down easily. But something had shifted. Daniel had found his voice. And in that voice, Maria saw hope. The days that followed were heavy with tension. Richard had not spoken directly to Maria since the confrontation in Daniel's room. Orders were relayed through the butler, meals were eaten in silence, and Daniel refused to sit beside his father at the dinner table. The once lively home now felt like a cold prison, its wealth unable to mask the emptiness inside. Maria continued her duties, though her heart was never at rest. Every knock at her door made her fear dismissal. Every moment with Daniel felt like it could be their last together. But she also saw something new in the boy, an awakening of courage, a sense of justice that even she hadn't expected. One evening, as storm clouds gathered again above the Kingston estate, Richard sat alone in his study. He poured himself a glass of brandy, staring at the fire crackling in the grand fireplace. His mind replayed Daniel's words, "You can't tell me who to love. Maria is good. She's kind. You're wrong about her." For years, Richard had prided himself on strength. Strength in business, strength in power, strength in controlling his household. But what good was that strength if his own son despised him? For the first time in his life, Richard felt the gnawing bite of doubt. The door creaked open. Daniel stood there, clutching his teddy bear. His small face was stern but vulnerable. "We need to talk," he said softly. Richard blinked in surprise. "About what?" "About Maria," Daniel replied, stepping closer. His voice wavered, but he pressed on. "She's not what you think. She's not dirty. She's not bad. She's love. She's the only one who's ever been there for me. If you send her away, you're sending me away too. Because I won't stay here with you if she's gone." The boy's words pierced Richard deeper than any insult could. He opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came. His son, the heir to his empire, the boy who carried his name, looked at him not with admiration but with disappointment. That night, Richard lay awake, haunted by his wife's memory. She had been a kind woman, compassionate and open-hearted. He remembered how she had once told him that love knows no boundaries of race, class, or status. "If you close your heart to others," she had whispered during one of their last nights together, "you'll close it to your own child too." He had brushed off her words then, too focused on his empire. But now, lying in the cold silence of his vast bed, those words returned like a prophecy. The next morning, Richard found Maria in the garden. She was trimming roses, her hands steady despite the storm brewing inside her heart. When she saw him, she straightened, bracing for the inevitable. "Maria," Richard began, his voice unusually soft. He struggled, his pride choking him, but he forced the words out. "I was wrong." Maria blinked in shock. Of all the things she expected, this was not one. "I said things I should never have said," Richard continued, his eyes fixed on the ground. "I let my ignorance blind me. And I hurt you. Worse, I hurt my son." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "Daniel loves you. And I can see now why. You've given him what I could not. Love, warmth, a family." Maria's throat tightened, but she stayed silent, waiting. "I don't deserve forgiveness," Richard admitted. "But I ask it, for Daniel's sake. Please, stay. Stay and keep being the mother he's needed." Tears welled in Maria's eyes, not just from relief but from the rare sight of a powerful man laying down his pride. "Mr. Kingston," she whispered, "I never wanted to take your place. I only wanted to fill the emptiness your son felt. Because no child should grow up without love." Richard nodded slowly, his face etched with the weight of his sins. "Then let's not fail him any longer." From the balcony above, Daniel had been watching, holding his breath. When he saw Maria and his father finally stand together without anger, he ran down the stairs and into the garden. He flung his arms around both of them, his small body bridging the gap. "We can be a family," he said, his voice trembling with hope. For the first time in years, Richard felt something shift in his heart. The cold walls he had built began to crumble, replaced by a warmth he thought long buried. He placed a hand gently on Maria's shoulder, the other on Daniel's back, and for once, he did not feel shame. The Kingston estate still gleamed with wealth and grandeur, but what shone brightest that day was not the chandeliers or the marble. It was the fragile, healing bond of a family learning to love beyond prejudice. Richard knew the road ahead would not be easy. Prejudices did not vanish overnight. But he also knew he could no longer live in the shadow of his ignorance. He had a son to raise, a memory of his wife to honor, and a chance, Perhaps his last. To do right. And at the heart of it all was Maria, the woman he had once tried to cast out, now the very reason his house had found light again.